good afternoon. I hope I'm audible. Thank you for this opportunity to share with us today. I'll be presenting on investigating microplastic pollution in the Nairobi River Basin of Kenya. And the whole idea is to try to identify if we have pollution sources as it relates to microplastics within that region, as well as to offer some options for looking at or suggesting some potential solutions for countering microplastic pollution within that basin. Presentation is.
Technical team, please assist in projecting a presentation.
Thank you. And so when we talk about plastics, we can think of plastics. Plastics are everywhere. The laptop we have, the vehicle we're driving. Plastics are quite around us, and because of the nature of plastics, we've been using a lot of plastics. And when I'm referring to plastics, I'm looking at our synthetic or semi-synthetic polymers, which are basically petrochemical based. And so based on that, we have quite a bit since the 1950s when we started commercially producing plastics. We have quite a bit of plastics now in our environment, in use, in production and in use. And we've had an annual growth of or increase in production at about 8.7%. And so we've been consuming quite a bit of plastics. And so plastic has been accumulating over time in our environment. And if we go to slide 4, you'll see that plastics has been termed as one of our major pollutants or global pollutant based on the amount that we have in the environment and the fact that they are chemically, we have no solution. I'm sorry, I think I was muted there. So as I was saying, plastic pollution presents as one of our major issues in terms of a global pollution problem. Nevertheless, what we'll see as plastics continue to be a growth in the amount of plastics we have in the environment because of the whole nature, the cost, the economics as it relates to plastic, and the properties such as it being lightweight and so on. We'll continue to have plastics as a major problem or a major pollution source within our environment. Even if we stop the use of plastics today, given the amount we have, we'll have an issue in terms of microplastics as the amount of plastic, as the plastics break down into smaller size. And so if we move to slide 6, please, what I'll be looking at briefly today is one, understanding what's the problem in terms of plastic and plastic pollution. And in particular, my focus will be on microplastics. I'll look at number 6, the interaction between microplastic and the environment. And the number 10, in terms of what sort of policies, what can we have in place to address microplastics. So slide 7, please. As I said, slide 7, please. As I said, the problem is that even if we stop producing plastics now, the amount of plastics we have in the environment just now will start degrading, and our plastics degrade over time. And so the number of particles, microplastic particles, and actually go down to nanoplastic particles that we would have would be increasing with time. So the particles would be getting smaller in terms of size, and the number of particles would be increasing. And so what's the issue? Based on the nature of plastic, then we'll have those plastics um, remaining in our environment for years. And based on the chemical composition of plastics, because we have different plastics from the clothes we wear to our drink bottle to the computer we have different plastic, polyethylene, polypropylene, and so on. And so the chemical composition of these particles will be different. And so when we release that in the environment, we have the problem of releasing these chemicals in the environment, as well as depending on the sort of environment we're in, we have the problem of the plastic absorbing. We have absorption, so adsorption and absorption of the pollutant in that is in the environment. The plastics have been released, and so that will be an area for ecological disruption. And so why focus on the Nairobi River Basin? The Nairobi River Basin is one of the major ecosystems here in Kenya, and over 1,500 plant species. We have its agricultural lands, its wetlands, and we have around 55% of our communities, residents, in Nairobi, who are basically living in informal settlements in the Nairobi River Basin area. The river basin is also critical to our economic livelihood for many residents, and as well as environmental sustainability within that region. Slide 11, please. And so we need to look at the river basin and see how exactly we can therefore address the problem if indeed microplastics and microplastic pollution is a problem in that region, and therefore how we can, if it's a problem, how we can address it. We have seen before many studies that have focused on other pollutants within the basin, and we haven't in general looked at microplastic as a problem because it's not something we see. We talk about the great garbage patch in the Pacific Ocean because we can see a lot of that the macro-sized particles, plastics within the river. So whether it's a great patch in the Pacific Ocean or areas along the Nairobi River where we see these large plastic waste, we are able to talk about that. But the question becomes, what about the small size particles? Because we do know that the plastics will deteriorate with time, and so we'll have small particles. And the smaller these particles are, the more likely they are to absorb whatever pollutants. And the problem is with that is that if we are using it for this water for agricultural use and so on, then we would be having these plastics being probably ingested by us humans. And so what I've done in a study is two. One was a study where I used an empirical relationship, slide 13, please, and empirical relationship,
1 minute, please. 1 minute, please,
that was
Claudia.
out there in terms of being able to measure the amount of plastics, microplastics that might be deposited in the ocean based on um, practices of improper practices of waste management, as well as I looked at a study looking at the different socioeconomic communities within Nairobi, some different socioeconomic communities, and based on the wastewater discharge, how much microparticles, well, first, are there microplastics contained within that wastewater, and therefore uh, how much wastewater is contained within that water.
1 minute, 1 minute,
And
please,
so
Claudia.
slide 15, please. So if you look, basically, I looked at one in terms of that mismanaged waste, how much waste, microparticles and microparticles would be discharged into Nairobi River. And two, in terms of wastewater, which is a major source, how much we would be looking at. And in either case, if for our mismanaged waste, on average, we're looking at a discharge of around 67,000 tons of plastics, microplastics within the Nairobi River Basin per year. And even looking at just the waste generation, yes, we have about 67 million, 67 tons of waste. And if we look at, in particular, the wastewater that we discharge, we have seen that it is indeed a possible source of microplastic pollution within the Nairobi River Basin area.
Hello,
And so, as
Claudia.
I said, I focused on the litter as well as the wastewater. And so there's opportunities for further studies looking at the landfills. For instance, the Dandora is right next to the area, and so that can pose a problem as well. And so in wrapping up, what was proposed is that we can look at legislation. We can look at four main areas in terms of addressing the microplastic pollution within the Nairobi. We can look at a circular economy where upfront we look at reusing the plastics or upcycling plastic. We can look at an eco-based approach where we have seen studies have shown that if we use plant okra, we are able to remove microplastic from the soils and so on, as well as looking at legislation such as banning, where other countries have looked at already, by banning, for instance, the use of face products, bath products, cosmetics that contain microplastics. Innovation is also an option, where we have seen also studies show that we can make vanilla flavoring from microplastics. So thank you. That's my presentation. Thank you so much for listening.